Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Proof Beyond Reason.
Proof beyond reason.
Number 30.
30
We made it!
episodes.
Ah!
So crazy. We escaped our 20s.
Man, 30. It's good. I'm
Becomes
excited about
that
it.
Maturity, right?
There is a sense of maturity, yes. There is a sense in which puberty is no longer.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, right?
I
20.
don't know about the 20s, man.
I mean, some people. Let's dive right into it, man. We have a topic.
Hold on, though.
What?
I mean, come on. I escaped the garage. I'm not wearing the same
That's
outfit.
true. That's
My hair's
true.
changed now.
You know what? I was gonna mention that his beard is a little bit like, I don't know. I feel it's cleaner. It's longer, but it's cleaner.
It has
That's
like a
'cause I
different
trimmed it.
style, yeah.
That's because I trimmed and fixed some things up. That was like 2 days ago, though.
We need to do like a competition where we rate your beard, and every week it needs to be longer.
It's going to grow every week, so.
So you can't shave until December.
Whoa.
Okay. I mean, I was thinking about February, but
Yeah, you know
okay.
it's March, right?
Oh,
So-
he said February.
I said February.
So you can't shave till February, and we'll see how long that beard gets. And
Yeah.
if the beard is like substantial, because I mean he can grow a full beard.
Yeah.
So if it's substantial, we need to do something about it. Like we need to do some new something. Like
Are we going to let our listeners, like,
chime in. I mean,
Chime
when,
in,
after it's like
what to do.
more, after it's more
I
powerful.
say he does one of those, those 3 braids.
And then he braids it into one long one with the rubber bands on the bottom.
Oh, I've seen those.
Yeah, you could do that with your biker hair and your biker jacket.
yeah, sounds like an idea.
Done.
Do you
Let's
think
do
that's
it.
possible with your job, or?
I mean, yeah.
He said, yeah. All
I mean,
right.
yeah.
All right.
Come on now.
It's like I run this.
He's like, I run this.
But
I
yeah,
run
let's
this.
start.
So Easter's coming up, Easter Sunday. So by when you're listening to this, you're probably a few days away from Easter, or maybe the day after Easter. Who knows? Whenever you're listening,
We're hopping right into it.
but oh my God, oh Lord, oh Lord.
I just had to throw that out there.
So hopping into this Easter topic, should Christians celebrate Easter? This is a debate that has been going on for quite some time in different church circles, and some churches refuse to celebrate Easter, some do. Jehovah's Witnesses, who are not Christian, they oppose Easter as a holiday. In fact, they oppose all holidays, including birthdays. So what is our stance on Easter? So what do you guys got? As you guys are talking, I'm going to eat these delicious chips away from the mic, but I will eat nonetheless.
I think from what I see, like, I don't know if this is just my observation or whatever. I see a lot of churches do, like, they celebrate it, but their reasoning behind it is for the kids. And it's similar to kind of like all the Halloween, like all the holidays, like Halloween. They won't say Halloween. It's dress up day or whatever, or in the same thing for Easter. They'll have like an egg drop, or they'll have something for the kids, because ay bendito, we can't, we have to do something for the kids, so that's from my observation. That's kind of what I see. I'm sure there's a lot of churches out there that don't celebrate it, but from just a couple of the churches I've been to, they do something for the kids.
Do
They
like an
don't-
Easter egg hunt.
Yeah,
or-
like they put some eggs in the ground. You have to kind of find them or something or whatever, but they don't celebrate it, but they'll do it indirectly. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know if there needs to be clarity on what it is that we're kind of either talking about or celebrating. So you have the resurrection of Jesus, which is what the intent, I think, what you mentioned. But then there's almost like a side activity that aligns itself with the Easter holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be a distinction and a point of clarity to understand what the differences are. And I would even say, when it comes to even like Halloween, you have what's the first? The first is November 1st. It's It's like All Saints Day.
All Saints Day is November 1st. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the day before it's
All Hallows Eve.
All
or Saint
Hallows
Ian.
Eve, right? But it's a celebration of those that have been martyred.
Mhm.
So, is it a way to mimic the Halloween, Hallows Eve? Like, what is it the other way around? Is it that Christians have been the originators of that holiday, and then we had the pagans that came to celebrate in their own way? The same thing with Easter. Is it that the resurrection of Jesus occurred during this time period, and you had pagans that shared the holiday, or is it along with the theories that you have today, where Christianity is just a collaboration of different ideas put together, and we are just kind of celebrating myths?
If you think about like the programming, like you develop young as a kid, right? And if all you know is Halloween and dressing up, like I think the thought behind it is that the children are not capable of understanding something as deep as the resurrection, or as, you know what I mean? So instead of sitting down with your kids and saying, hey, this is the reason that we're celebrating, it's almost like minimizing the event, because you're thinking they're just kids. We're trying to make it fun, instead of really kind of showing what the reason behind the holiday
I mean,
is.
you could say that, but it's also, in a sense, conditioning. Because you'll have kids who are explicitly looking at certain things and seeing it as a normal day basis, so then they start seeing everything else as normal when they're growing up. So we have, like, homosexuality going around, and people are seeing that now in cartoons and shows. They're hearing it a lot more, so now they're seeing it as all just normal. As part to before, where it was considered like a sin, or it wasn't even legal to have anything or even talk about that type of thing before.
You have to push it through media as often, as frequently as possible, for it to become a norm. And that was kind of the philosophy for Madonna. Madonna, and when she came out and she was doing music, her music was very controversial, particularly her music videos and her concerts. But the philosophy behind what she was doing was, we need to, in order to normalize it, has to be frequent. It has to be something that it doesn't provide shock and awe. And in fact, we desensitize you to the sensitivity of whatever you're seeing. So if you see what you mentioned, with homosexual relationships, or sexual promiscuity, or whatever it is, show it enough and it'll be normal. Interesting that she had that philosophy in projecting. And I don't know how her kids are doing. I don't know anything about this lady, right? But as she was raising her kids, she raised her kids to say, we don't watch TV in my house. Because I know what I do to mold. I'm going to teach my kids what I want to teach them.
Yep.
So it's very interesting, the dynamic where many of the families and the children that I know, they're engulfed in media, allowing media to raise our kids, from the television shows to social media to YouTube. You don't know what kind of commercials are coming on.
That reminds me of an interview I saw with Johnny Depp. I think it was one of those late night talk shows. They asked him what does he think about his characters, and he specifically says, "I don't watch any of my movies, or my kids watch any of my movies." And I was just like, "That's crazy! Like, you're playing I think he's played like every single role possible, like criminal, villain, whatever, and yet he has yet to see any of his movies."
I know artists who don't listen to, so like hip hop artists, they don't listen to hip hop. Like even Christian hip hop artists, they don't get inspiration by listening to their genre, or they don't listen to music at all. You're like, oh, what do you listen to
They
in the
don't
car?
have time.
Yeah, or they just don't choose to. Like, oh, what kind of music do you listen to? I really don't listen to music.
Like the truth just says he listens to like the classics.
Yeah, like jazz and just whatever. So you put out content, but don't really listen to what's going on, not necessarily staying in tune with what's going on. And it's not a shot at anyone in particular, but it's interesting that for an artist, from the artistic standpoint, tend to shy away from that, even though the influence is this way. They kind of shy away from. But it's super interesting. You know what I'm saying?
I was reading an article that was saying, I forget the exact ages, but they were saying that early in your development, like even the type of music that you listen to, like from age like 11 to like 16 or something like in that bracket. That's kind of like the taste. Of course, you like all types of music and stuff like that, but the one that's the main type of music that you listen to is probably the type of music that you're going to be listening to for the rest of your life. And even though you might not think that that's true, if you think about it, us as being in our, late 20s, early 30s, the type of music that we listen to with that age bracket, even the newer version of like whether it be hip hop or whether it be any type of music, the new generation of version of that, it's very like, I don't even want to listen to it, because our minds have been programmed to think, wow, that this type of genre is supposed to be like that particular way. So it kind of goes into the programming. You were speaking like on Madonna. It's interesting to me that I remember doing some research, like just the reason I did this research is because I thought one of my friends was brainwashed.
Oh God, here we go.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
Here we go. Gee, take notes on this dude.
No, I thought one of my friends was brainwashed. So I was like, does this person like going crazy or something like that? So I started doing research on brainwashing and stuff like that. And it's interesting that you mentioned even about Madonna. But one of the things that brainwashing has to do is it has to be continual. It has to be continual. In order for brainwashing to be solidified in a person, it has to be continually spoken to, And so it's kind of like that. Like, what is the conditioning? Is that there has to be a reason why Madonna doesn't want her kids to listen to, because she knows the programming early on in that age bracket that's going to probably be with her for the rest of her life.
It's not just, Madonna's kids are growing up now, and again, we don't know how their lives turned out. We don't know, we're not prepared to even talk about that, but she's not rare in that. You hear that from other artists. You hear that from what you just said, Johnny Depp or many other artists who choose not to allow their children to, and some artists do, but when you're talking specifically, what is the content they're putting out? That's the piece.
Yep.
What are they putting out? And as a result of what they're putting out, they're molding the society. They're molding the world. They're molding to think a certain way, to have a certain influence, certain path. And yet they're saying, no, we don't do that. We don't do that at all.
So then
it's weird.
It just takes us back to then the church, because in the church growing up, in my experience, was we celebrated Easter, but during the whole growing up, like you guys were saying, like Sunday school was all egg hunts, painting eggs. Not really that much talk about Jesus. It just says Jesus' resurrection. Sure, when you come meet your parents again, you're all praying in the end. But then as you're growing up, you start getting in the church, and you're not like in Sunday school as per se. Then they start talking about the resurrection there. So then you start leaving the bunnies behind.
I remember I was on a missions trip to St. Augustine. It was like a mini missions trip with one of my churches, and we had to be housed at like a person's house. So it was like 3 of us at a woman's house. The woman was like a single woman, but she had like a 5 or 6 year old kid, and so I'm like in the car with this kid that's sitting right next to me, and I'm describing to him like all these things about God. And he was grasping the material. And I was like, this kid is like brilliant. So I was like, you know what, Jesus is about this? Did you know about, he's like, yeah, well, this. I'm like, this guy is not 5 or 6 years old. But it hit me at one point when the kid was like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm only 5. And so the reality is, what I told him? I was like, well, you grasp everything I say. So don't let that be an excuse that you're only 5. So I had like this grown man conversation with this 5-year-old. So a lot of times we think, oh man, these egg hunts, or they can't grasp the material, but that's a lie.
Yeah, we dumb it down for them.
Jesus was 8 years old teaching the temple. And sure, we could say Jesus, like it's Jesus, but it's a kid, regardless.
8? 12.
12, yeah.
I was going to say, you're going to get an email. Get an email from somebody.
Well, we don't know, no, but it had to be, I think,
Yeah,
at
yeah,
12
so-
because of his.
Yeah.
age.
So I mean, either way, yeah, we tend to dumb things down for children, assuming. So I think there's every child is different, certain level of maturity. But if we keep kids in a certain place, I think the fear is that you're robbing the child of childhood. But I'm not sure how much I agree with what that means. They're still going to be a child, and they're still going to play. They're still going to be creative. They're still going to use their brains. They're still going to have fun. They're going to be silly. They're going to do things in repetition. But just like a sport, if you can get good at a sport, you play the sport with somebody who's better than you, right? Martial arts, if you're going to spar, you spar with someone who's better than you so you can get better. We tend to want to gravitate children to be at the same level as everyone else. That's kind of what we're taught. That's what we're fed to make sure that they're all at the same level. You don't want to make them too advanced. You don't want them to hang out with the adults. But why not? Why can't they be around the adults?
They are our future.
Why can't they have conversation or join in, or in knowing that we're having conversation, we know their contribution is going to be less mature because we have more life experience and so forth, and we can teach them to, hey, just ask for permission to speak and so forth. But that disengages the child, and so they're gonna go off and play and be kids, and the next thing you know, you have a 25-year-old kid on your hands. He doesn't know how to grow up.
Yeah, we call it adolescence now, right?
Yeah,
But
adolescence
if
is like through 25 or something. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah, but even the word adolescence, or even not even just the word, but in social dynamics, like 50, 60 years ago, adolescence wasn't even a thing. Like, you were 17, you were a grown man, but we had put like regressed in the like social dynamics, I guess, in one sense,
Yeah, yeah. So Easter, what do you got? What insight do you have as far as the celebration? Why is it dangerous? Are we doing it right? I mean, I have some rebuttals. You know what I'm saying? I think.
Now, just to be crystal clear with everyone, I did grow up in a Christian household, and we did celebrate Easter. My family celebrates Easter hardcore. It wasn't until 2010 I no longer celebrate any holidays. That's just what I've been led to believe. I believe strongly in what Paul was speaking to the churches, where I'll pull up the exact verse in one moment, where he's talking about that.
I'll pull it up for you.
Where he's saying that some people can celebrate certain holidays while other people will see every day as holy. That's how I see it. Every day is of God's. I don't set one specific day and say I will celebrate God on this particular day. Every day for me is celebration to God. But in that regards, Easter. Now, those of you know I came mostly or in and out of an occult background. So I was always taught right from the beginning everything about pagan holidays. So you have Easter, which from the Greco-Anglan word comes Astara, Eastre. That will mean fertility or spring in the essence of what we have now, spring and fertility. That comes from what we now know as the Babylonian religion, which is Ishtar. Follows them. She was the goddess of fertility. And then they wanted to associate bunnies because bunnies multiply in great multitudes. So it was basically the celebration of where you come together, and since it was spring, it was the dawn of a new age where you had the darkness, which was Tammuz, the god of darkness, and then you have Istara, which is the goddess of fertility. She's bringing in a new age, bringing in new light. So then you have the equivalent of light and darkness. So you have Istara coming in. She's going to bring a new change, so a lot of fertility, and that was celebrated by massive orgies or giving worship to her by having like tons of sex. So then you'll see the Romans, or you'll see a lot of the republics at the time or empires start rising by childbirths only because of during that stages.
Wow, that's interesting.
So how does that, so when we talk about the historical consistency with the resurrection of Jesus, Christians are generally given this reputation, and it's true, where
Where it says we copied.
where maybe either we copied or we tried to put a holiday like Christmas, for example. We don't know when Jesus was born, but the time period is not too far off from the Christmas holiday. So seeing that the time period is not radically off, but the day might not be, right? We don't know. We can. It's pretty clear that that we are the ones who imposed ourselves on that holiday, right? We can be consistent in that, but I don't think that's the case the other way around. I think because we're talking about Passover.
Yep.
Passover has been around for 3,000 years, more than that. So during Passover season, this is Passover season. Passover starts on Friday. So I think in the quote Easter celebration or the resurrection celebration, so acknowledging his death, celebrating the resurrection from a historical standpoint, we're in the right. We're in line with the I'm just not sure where Easter falls into that. Whether the church is wrong for the actual celebration in general. I'm not talking just the eggs and the bunny. I don't agree with the eggs and the bunny. I think it is incorrect. But the time period of the celebration, are we the ones putting it over a pagan holiday? Is the pagan holiday trying to rob the resurrection? What is it?
Well, I think even just to, you said something about Jesus' birthday and stuff like that. Not to go too much into it, but there's one guy. His name is Jonathan Cahn, great Bible teacher. He's actually a Messianic Jew. I don't know if
it's dude with the real black beard.
Yeah, very, very. In my opinion,
interesting.
Very, very good. But
interesting.
he says that it doesn't even make sense for it to be around December, where we even put it.
You're talking Christmas
era. Or Christmas time. He says that it would have to be like in like a Jewish holiday. So he said he puts it the first month of Nisan.
The birth of someone needs to be on a Jewish holiday?
No. Not necessarily the birth of someone, but because everything lines up perfectly with God, like in certain events.
Okay.
Like he says, I guess, that it would have to line up like with certain things. He explains a lot better than I can ever do it. But he puts it in the first month of Nisan in their calendar, and it actually puts it around March or April.
See, I've heard different. I've heard September, October.
Yeah. Well, his explanation, when you listen to it, who knows at the end of the day? Like we are only speculating, but when he puts it that way, it really does make sense because of the time that he was born and the time that he dies, but not to say that there's any correlation of the time but
right.
But if it's everything is perfect with God, there has to be everything was perfect when the time of Moses and stuff, when it came to certain not numerology but certain events.
Maybe I would like to hear that. Yeah, I would like to hear about what he says.
I just think it's interesting that if he dates it, and this guy is a person who is Jewish, and he puts it at the first month of Nisan for a particular reason, and it so happens to be in March or April.
Yeah, I would like to hear that, because the only thing we have are the geographical cues and what we have in the text to allow us to navigate what time period. Beyond that, we would be using extra information to try to put on what is communicated in Scripture. Yeah. So that's dangerous. If that's what's being done, if we're trying to put on, in that, what we can, again, is what does the Scripture say? What is the time period? And then try to assess based on the information we're given. And from my understanding, and I could be totally wrong, to my understanding, based on those factors, it's like a September time frame.
Based on what factors?
The time period when they were told to for the census. So it's the census time period when that would happen.
The flocks
Being outside,
Would it be?
all of those
Would the
things.
flocks be outside in December?
They would
No,
not be in
no.
December. No, that's why it wouldn't be in December. But the time period, the season
What,
wouldn't be too far
It
off.
would probably be towards one of their holidays. So the Jewish holidays.
Not
so that's-
necessarily, because the census was not run by the Jews. The census was run by the Romans.
Mm,
So it has not. They don't give a crap about Jewish holiday. See what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it depends. So I would like to listen
There's
in
a,
on
there's
this
a lot
guy.
of things
yeah,
to
yeah.
study. It's worth
Yeah.
a note.
That'll
to
be
study.
an episode. That's a whole episode
Yeah.
right there to talk about when. But G, you got something on Easter?
I have the legends of where it comes from, Easter. So the story is called the Descent of Inanna. Inanna is what you call Ishtar,
Oi.
and then Dumuzi. It is a Sumerian legend. Dumuzi, which is Tammuz. And then it says it's found in 2100 BC in a cuneiform clay tablet. They found the story. And it says when Tammuz dies, Ishtar is grief-stricken and follows him to the underworld. In the underworld, she enters through 7 gates, and her worldly attire is removed. Naked and bowed low, she is judged, killed, and then hung on display. In her absence, the earth loses its fertility, crops cease to grow, and animals stop reproducing. Unless something is done, all life on earth will end. After Inanna has been missing for 3 days, her assistant goes to other gods for help. Finally, one of them, Enki, creates 2 creatures who carry the plants of life and water of life down to the underworld, sprinkling them on Inanna and Damazi, resurrecting them and giving them the power to return to the earth as the light of the sun for 6 months. After the 6 months are up, Tammuz returns to the underworld of the dead, remaining there for another 6 months, and Ishtar pursues him, prompting the water god to rescue them both. Thus where the cycles of winter, death, and spring and life are formed.
When was
So
that? When
that's
was that? Do we have a time period?
2100 BC is when they found the cuneiform clay tablets. But we're talking about Babylonian times where it was already written. And from my research, I've found that Babylon was like the founding, where all religions stem from. That's basically where Babylon is. Because what we now know as Ishtar, we can
Or
actually-
pagan religions.
Yes, pagan religions. Because what we can now trace for like Ishtar, it's Aphrodite, Greek and Roman god. Greek god, and then we have for the Romans, which is Venus, and then that can stretch on for.
So where does
The comparison is when she went down.
Oh,
for
yeah,
3
yeah,
days
yeah.
to the underworld,
Oh,
and then
absolutely.
was resurrected back to life.
that's the parallel that is trying to
correct.
happen. So then, that is interesting. That is interesting. So then, what I find even more interesting is how, when the serpent is confronting Eve, did God really say? And when we have the historical narrative of Scripture, which if you look at our previous podcast, the historicity of the Bible, check that out. We have some pretty good insight on that. I think it's interesting that if there would be a parallel to a historical narrative that would later take place, and this narrative is not a historical narrative, right? This one is a what would this be classified as? It would be mythology, right?
Mythology, yeah.
So if the mythology lines up with a later historical narrative, for me that says someone read Scripture or came in tune with Scripture to know that there would be something that occurs.
I think the argument
But I think
against
it's
that
interesting.
is that the Babylonian writing is right?
Yeah, that's the earliest you can actually.
It's
go with.
predated to not the Scriptures.
It's the earliest that they can find ever of Easter origins.
But I mean the Scriptures in general. We're talking Moses' writings and so forth.
Cuneiform 3200. That's
Well, it
actually-
describes that era.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it has to be
Because the events
right
of
there with it.
Yeah, the events of Passover happened, over 3,000 years ago. Well over 3,000
So
years
you
ago.
have to think of the Bible is written with prophetic books as well. So
Mhm.
there has, if
It
the
predates, yeah.
yeah. So if the enemy knows in search of, that something's gonna happen, then
Well, whatever
confusion
Moses wrote
or
about,
whatever.
he wrote about it after how many
Oh, yeah,
centuries
yeah.
of
Like 200, 300 centuries.
of
After everything.
verbal tradition. Then it gets written down to say, hey, these are some things that happened. This is what they believed. These are some of the things that went on. Now me, right? Abraham, none of that was written. Abraham didn't write none of that. Moses wrote about Abraham. Isaac, none of that was written by them. Moses was the one who wrote that later on. But I think
You have some of those claims though, like Enoch wrote some things. That's why you have the Book of Enoch.
correct, yeah. So that is an interesting because it almost makes it feel like the Gilgamesh, like Epic of Gilgamesh.
I mean, it's the same Babylonian.
Correct. So you have that story, and then you have the story of the flood. But when you look at the actual historical events that happen surrounding Jesus and how it happened, it's real tough on that. But it makes it interesting for me. It doesn't make it look like, oh well, then the Jesus account is what it makes it. For me, it looks like, wow, even in pagan is prophesying about a historical event that is to come.
I think they would take it the opposite way, right? They would say, look at all our writings, look at all this, look at the evidence. And it doesn't stop there with the Babylonian writings, right? It's it parallels in all these different religions, like even the birth of Jesus, right? And like Mary and all this stuff. So like where we,
'Cause then
Right,
you have
but-
the story of
so-
Horus.
but
Horus was
Horus,
dead. And
so
then
there's a lot of
resurrected.
parallels that we see,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, we see that in that movie Zeitgeist, and that's where we debunk Zeitgeist had been debunked, but that's where it's tough on their account because their account is it doesn't have the substance of the historical narrative. It never has the historical narrative substance.
I mean, one thing to quote. I mean, this is gonna be like completely out in the ballpark, but something that some people can reference to get a better grasp of it is you take, for example, Rick Ross. You have Rick Ross, which
Ricky.
he developed his own persona and supposed history, and then you have the real Rick Ross coming out of jail and saying he's all fake.
That's
He's
interesting.
taking my name and everything.
That's interesting that you
well,
would
the
point that
real
out. Or
is-
Freeway,
wasn't
the real Freeway,
Rick Ross a correctional officer or something like that?
the
Like
the
the-
hip hop artist.
The hip hop
Yeah.
The hip hop artist Rick Ross, yes, was a correctional officer. The actual Rick Ross, don't. Yeah.
Yeah, no. But it's something like that. So you take
Yeah.
the false story and just like change it up into your own style. Not a false story, but change
It's like you take a persona.
take a
or something, right?
persona and try to adopt it but make it your own.
But how much it predates the actual historic? That's what I find interesting.
I think that's what some people like the way that you view it is coming from that lens, like a Christian lens, basically. But another
Well,
person,
I'm even trying to remove the Christian lens of it. I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of
Historic.
this story does not have historical weight. It has a mythical weight, and it's talking about something that had happened, but there's no historical pretense to it.
I think
whereas,
for another person,
but whereas Jesus though it's all historical. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just like they just
it's
pull
almost
something
like
out
to
of thin
creep
air.
up on right next to bring validity to your own. But
Right.
But from another person's perspective, like a person that was maybe just programmed or drawn towards the occult, they would see all these writings and they'd be like, I can look back in history and see how Jesus in his death is fake, or he was just one of the teachers of this is the real world religion. And it all stems to that Babylon time. So you can easily get into some occult things saying we have the real truth.
But that's where you if we talk about like spiritual religious systems, if you peel back the layer, so remove the lens of being a Christian, remove the lens of being a cultist, the argument it collapses because you don't have historical backing, whereas the story of Jesus has historical backing. It has complete historical backing. So it makes the other story look bad.
But if you're the first one to put it on writing, and then the other ones is just verbal, you know what I mean? Then it brings validity on the other side. So it's like, I'm in agreement with you, but I can see how other people might say,
yeah, it
if
can
the
be
Babylonian writings, this dates way before. Look at that. The Bible copied us.
well, the Gnostic writings predates the gospel writings. The Gnostic gospel predates the synoptic gospel, and so the reason for that is they, in that competition, they were like, "Yo, like
Let's put it to the
we
paper,
we need to put together the real because they're putting together the fake. So their narrative is the fake narrative. We need to put together the real narrative. When you compare both, removing whatever lens you need to remove, but when you compare both, you're like, well, this one has the historical data that is supported.
Yeah.
This other one doesn't have the historical support, although it is interesting to read. It doesn't tell an accurate story because it doesn't have the historical support. So you can be entertained by both, but without the historical evidence to verify whatever document you're writing, it is just a story.
Yeah. So it's
like
almost
anything.
like piggybacking off of the validity, since the Bible is the one that is has the validity from historical standpoint, and it has parallels in these but they were the first ones to put it to writing. It's almost like look at the validity of this one if it talks about the same.
Well, it wouldn't even, so if you even talk about, let's say, and it might be way off topic, but if you talk about societies, you can't devalue Israel because their society formed formally after Babylon, right? Babylon was already, currencies and writings and art and hierarchical systems and government, and you keep naming it. They're already a powerhouse.
Yeah,
they're already a powerhouse. So then Israel comes along and they're babies. But just because they came after doesn't devalue the validity or the reality that this is still a real nation, and they also did these things. But now when they did it and they had more backing, more evidence, they had more support, because obviously God is the one providing that, it becomes tough then on the person who predated to say, what, have you been lying to us the whole time? Well, now you have a competitor, so yeah, you've been lying to us the whole time.
It's interesting that, after the fall, God the Father in heaven already knew that he was going to send his son for a redemption plan. So it's so interesting to me that, these parallels exist, not just with Babylon, but like in Egypt. And so it's like different countries with the same parallels of what is yet to come, yet it was a prophetic thing.
I mean, it's something I've talked about in the cult episode where it's Satan likes using the same trick, as above, so below. That's always the underlying thing in magic or Thelema, things like that, which is Satan likes copying God. He wants to be into that equal spot.
It's
so
like there's no creative juices in this.
There's like no creative juice, so he basically just does everything. Now, his mentality will probably be like, if I do it first, then I can accomplish whatever it is, or I can reach that state. So say, like we were talking about briefly, for the Antichrist, what does he want to do? He wants to basically have, quote unquote, like the occult says, he wants to have his son so that he can become the God on earth, and then his kingdom will reign.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a lot. It's a lot. But if we look at the resurrection of Jesus, the events of his death, so just the events of his death alone, a myriad of accounts. Again, go back into one of our episodes. It's called the historicity of the Bible, but then you also have
The historicity of Jesus.
The history of Jesus, or it's titled something like that. Jesus, I don't know. Go back, check out all the episodes. Just listen to all 30. We dive into the specifics of where the historical accounts came from, who quoted, where those books were found, all that stuff. And we go not just into the biblical accounts, but also the extra biblical accounts, which allow for us to talk the way we're talking now with confidence. But just the death of Jesus, there's so much evidence of, he died. Even in the Babylonian Talmud, there's the record of him actually dying. And now, the resurrection is where the resurrection itself just posed so much controversy, and it posed so much opposition to the Roman government that there was mass persecution as a result of that. So people were saying, he resurrected, and we're not bowing to Caesar. We're going to worship Jesus. He proved himself. He's here. He showed up. And the response of the Christian community during times of martyrdom is insane, because if it's all a lie, which it could be, right? People can be brainwashed if you allow that. But there wasn't enough time in between. It was so minute of a time period where the persecutions happened that that people were actually growing in number as a result. Like, you would think, if this is a lie and these dudes are getting hacked because it's fake, I'm not touching that. But if it's real, and the people not only have been convinced it's real, but the evidence has been there that it's real, they have no choice but to say, look, I get it. You're about to cut my head off, but I just can't deny I just can't worship you because of what's happening. So off with your head too. The response, the presentation to over 500 believers, and probably even upwards of 1,000, you know what I'm saying? But 500 believers. You had his presence on earth, his ascension to heaven, the response of the church after his ascension to heaven. Like, there were just so many things that happened, that have been verified over time, that it becomes tough to deny the actual resurrection. And that's the whole point. Is to deny the resurrection is to deny Christianity. That's what we bank our faith on. Paul says, if not for the resurrection of the dead, then what we are doing here is meaningless. We have no point in what we're doing. Actually, can you turn on that light? Right there, turn on the light. We're like operating in the dark here. Bomb, there it is. Look at that. Boom, beautiful. Thank you. So there's like no point in us being even believers, because the resurrection didn't happen. And if the resurrection that didn't happen, then we are the most pitied people, not just because of what we believe, but everyone is still under condemnation. If Jesus did not resurrect, no one has hope. No one. There is no hope in any other faith.
Humanity is destroyed. It's doomed for destruction, because we were already doomed for destruction without Jesus. So if he didn't, there's no resurrection, all humanity is lost.
When Jesus came, his ministry, he said very clearly, I did not come to bring condemnation. You're already condemned. That's tough. That's powerful. Like, we talk about, John 3:16. In that chapter, he talks about, I'm not coming to bring condemnation. Like, you're already condemned. I'm not bringing that to you. You guys are already condemned. I came to bring life. I came to save people. This is why I'm here. If not, you guys are doomed. Either it's me or it's nothing. Like, that's the reality of what it is. And if he did not resurrect, then that is, we have no hope. Can't hope in any other religion, because every religion is going to have the equivalence of working out your own salvation, inconsistency in terms of what the expectations are, what the morality should be. It's a power struggle. The heaven is whacked out. You know what I'm saying? It's tainted and is based on sexual pleasures. Like, it's just very strange. It's very, very strange
It's all
when you
about
read them.
you.
Yeah, when you
Ego.
read it, it's very strange because it taps into our sin. It taps into what pleases us here for us to be physically or emotionally pleased somewhere. Like, it's just very strange place. And Jesus doesn't bring that. Like, he doesn't bring that. He doesn't bring that. And the more I think about like the different promises of different religions, is like so whacked out, and the lack of hope that we have in all of those systems. If Jesus did not resurrect from the dead, Paul is absolutely right. There is no hope. There is no hope. No reason to be here. Done. And so the historical narrative is there. That's the attack.
I think when you think back at the historical standpoint as well, is you were talking about like in the book of Acts, it talks about like the early church after Jesus ascends. The promise of the Holy Spirit came, and so in this time period, physically people were doing miracles. So the Spirit of God was still in operation, and so that's what gave validity to.
Correct. Ushering in the new era, right? Correct.
So it's not that he left us alone and we didn't have no power. So it was almost like, this is the evidence. You want evidence? Here's the evidence that I resurrected, that I came in power, and you're going to have power as well, because I have overcame the world, you overcome the world. And so the evidence is there. With just like the people in the book of Acts and the early church and whatever documents are there, and the things that they were doing. Even the Bible describes even Peter healing people from the shadow. Jesus didn't even do that. Peter's shadow would heal somebody that was sick. His shadow, and it just increased. And even Jesus said it. The greater things you would do, speaking to his disciples, like, when I leave, it's about to go down. So that's exactly what happened, and it just gave validity for those that could ever claim, no, the resurrection didn't happen. At that time period, it was so evident that there was nothing they could do. It just spread like wildfire, because there was nothing you could do when people are willing to die for it. And it's not just like a martyr like we see, like, in other religions, they martyr for a particular reason. These people were getting martyred and there was nothing they were getting persecuted. Had no blame, but they were, persecuted, and yet power. When you read the book of Acts, you see Paul and Peter just worshiping God, and these supernatural acts of God, that the doors get unlocked. Like, crazy things were happening, and it was so evident that it gave validity to everything.
And that power can be seen when people are going through that kind of stuff. If anyone is wondering, why don't we see the power of God? Why don't we see these things happening, or these insane healings, or the presence of God and all of that? Generally, you see the miraculous of what God's doing when you're under persecution, when you're going through your hardest time, when you've lost everything, when you don't know when your next meal is, but we're comfortable. I mean, we're comfortable. You know what I'm saying? Like, our need is, for many people, not everybody listening here, but let's say for me, the need is in the midst of your riches. Are you aware of your idolatry? I'm coming after your heart. I'm molding you into the image of Christ. So you don't need the miracle necessarily. You don't need to see the miraculous or this physical power, because I'm humbling you. I'm turning your whole world upside down so you can reflect Jesus. You know what I'm saying? But when you're going through your illest problems, the most miraculous situations happen. You see the healing. You talk to people. I I remember a dude. He was, and I probably told the story before, but he was like on his, like he was like done. You know what I'm saying? And and I had the opportunity to pray for him, and I looked at him and I was like, man, I don't know why I'm telling you this because that's not the type of dude I am. But when you go back to the doctor's office, they're gonna see you have nothing, and what you were supposed to get done, you're not gonna get done. And I don't attribute that to me. He was in a desperate moment at that time, and God chose at that time to reveal himself to him through that situation. His back was against the wall. He had nothing. He was, you see what I'm saying? So, and the miracle came in the midst of that. And so essentially what I'm saying is, when you talk about the disciples, you're talking about dudes in prison. You're talking about guys who had $0 to the name. You're talking about no family to bail them out. Nothing. Like this is it. There's people pursuing them to kill them. And through that persecution comes this insane, these miracles that happen. Like God responding through that scenario. So he's showing up.
I always wondered this, and this is just a thought in my mind. You know, whenever someone gives an altar call and stuff like that, I've never heard this in my life, a pastor do this or a preacher do this. But if a pastor would give an altar call and says, you're going to if I'm going to paint a portrait for you in your mind. You're going to go through a lot of trials and tribulations. People are going to hate you. Nobody's going to like you because your life is now dead. If you want to accept God and you want to accept all the afflictions that come with it, but not only he doesn't leave you with afflictions, he fills you with the supernatural love and joy. But it will be a life that is temporary pain, but at the end of your life, you'll have everything. Who wants to come to the altar? I never heard that. But that's the reality and what Jesus kind of described. Maybe I go a little too extreme. Forgive me. But
I'll take it.
But that's the reality. We paint the picture of comfort. You know what I mean? We paint the picture like you don't even got to stand up. Just put one finger on your lap. Like how much comfort can I get that I can't even declare verbally in front of a congregation that I love Jesus? So at the end of time, that person that put that finger on the lap, what's going to happen to you when the Antichrist is on the scene?
When chopping dudes' heads off.
Chopping dudes' heads off. You know, where's the boldness? If you weren't bold for a congregation of 15, come on.
I was reading, because I'm reading a devotional on prayer, Tim Keller.
Oh, yeah.
And he talks about, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong, so forgive me. But he talks about, and I'm thinking about it now even, how Paul never prayed, or in his writings, in all of the letters that he wrote, he never
There's no joy.
no. He never wished them out of their circumstance. Like, he never prayed that they would get out of their circumstance. Like, he never was like, I hope God, like, removes you from your persecution, or that, you know, you have all the food you need. Like, he never prayed, like, any of that. There was zero prayer for the people about that.
If going into it, you portrayed that it was going to be a tough life, and you say, you know what, in the midst of that, sign me up. There would be no need to have any type of comfort, because you know this life is temporal. And you read the writings of Paul, he says, dude, this is nothing. This is temporal.
Told you.
I told you what it is. So,
we're going back to Easter, though.
Was that a tangent, or
it was a tangent?
But it was good because we talked about a lot of things. Babylon,
like
we talked
that.
about parallels.
But go back to G's thing. Romans 14. 14:5. It says, this is NIV. I couldn't find the other one. One person considers one day more sacred than another. Another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. Whoever regrets one day as special does so to the Lord, for they give thanks to God. And whoever abstains does so to the Lord to give thanks to God. For none of us live for ourselves alone, and none of us die for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord. If we die for the Lord. So whether we live, we die, we belong to the Lord. It's true. It's
And
true.
I mean, it ties in. I mean, you guys said it was a tangent, but it ties into everything what you guys were saying, though. Because in that regards, a lot of people like to say, oh, we just don't do certain things only because it's not in our right conscience. Or you'll have some people throw out like Deuteronomy 12:9, where it says, you shall not worship the Lord your God in that way for every abominable thing. And they'll continuously say things like that, but not in the regards of saying, like, I'm doing this for God. It's just they want to seem righteous. They want to seem holy. So they don't do certain things, or they don't say certain things. But yet in their mind, it's not for God. It's for themselves.
Or for other people to see.
Or for other people to see, exactly. So you'll have the Jehovah's Witnesses. They won't do necessarily, or they don't want to say where they get their research. They don't want to say who's doing their research. They'll just say, you can't celebrate it. And then the people, as in regards to be seen as holy, they'll say, oh, God said, or God instructed our ministers or our leaders to not do that certain thing, so we won't do it. But yet in that regards, like what Paul is saying, count the days as holy. If you count one day as holy, do so as to the Lord. But if you see every day as holy, count so.
What would you say if someone says, that's so extreme, and I'm a Christian, but how can I live in this world? I'm living in this world. Can I live my life? Can I do certain things? Like, what would you say to a person is like, I can't do nothing?
Basically, John was asking, let me live. That's what John's saying.
No, but I mean, I go, if anything, I go on the other spectrum, but I'm just trying to put myself in somebody else's mind. Like, what would you say
I believe
to a person
Paul
like
talks about that somewhat with food.
Also in Romans. I think also in Romans 14.
I think so. Romans 14, let me see. I think it's on here. Yeah, Romans 14, 1 through 23, where he says, as for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but do not quarrel over opinions. One person believes he may eat anything, while a weak person eats only vegetables. Let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats. For God has welcomed him. Who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It is before his own master he stands or falls, and he will be upheld. For the Lord who is able to make him stand. One person esteems one day as better than the other, while another esteems all day alike. So it's all about really where you stand in the faith.
It's true.
Like for me, for example, I eat. Like I'll eat bacon. I'll eat shark. I'll eat gator.
He said shark.
Yes, I'll eat.
Hold on. Rewind that.
For me, it's food.
Where do you get shark?
For me, it's food. It's a blessing from the Lord.
Absolutely.
And like for the days, I don't like people come up to me like, "Happy birthday, Gia," or like they'll give me Christmas gifts, Valentine. Like I told my girl strictly, we started dating in February, and I told her from the get-go, I don't celebrate Valentine's.
Don't expect anything from
Like-
Valentine's
Like
Day.
I gave her as a gesture, as a respect, because she celebrates it. Like I gave her a rose and a gift, but I was like, I don't celebrate holidays. Period. And to my family, they can always be having like 4 Christmas trees. Yes, my mother puts up 4 Christmas trees, but I
4?
don't. Yeah,
Dang, bro.
2 outside, 2 inside. But I don't celebrate
I see that.
holidays. But for me, it's every day is to the Lord. Like I wake up and I'm giving thanks for the resurrection, for the birth, for everything. Not just I don't have to be specific for one day, because some people focus just strictly on one day or the mainstream view of that one day, and they get consumed by that. And for me, it's all for God. What I eat, what I wear, everything. It's like what Paul also talks about, to be in constant prayer. I think prayer is not essentially what you say, or it's also what you do. For me, it's a lifestyle.
Action, yeah. I tend to agree with you as far as the way I view things. I view things every day is the Lord's, you know, and to be honest, just to be totally transparent with the people listening and people at this table, I get why we celebrate Resurrections, Sunday. I get it, because it's like, yo, Jesus resurrected on this day X number of years ago. The Easter part, I don't agree. So the kids, hunting and stuff. Now that I have a kid,
Hunting.
whatever, hunting rabbit, murdering rabbits. I think we're gonna allow her to participate just to see her run around and be, because it looks cute, and she gets just really just for her to run around so she could take a nap at 2:00. But the reality is our responsibility is to teach her what's real and what's right, and for us not to get caught up in that season, right? Easter. But to recognize this is the time period where Jesus resurrected. So if you want to be super geeked about the fact that during this time period, this is what happens, I think it is a good acknowledgement from a historical standpoint to reaffirm the historicity of that date, just like the Jewish tradition has always historically stood by the holidays.
Yeah,
They always remember. They always set up. The Jewish people always set up a monument. They always set up. Jesus says, "Do this in remembrance of me." Even when he's talking about the Passover, it was no accident that he died in the Passover. He's the Passover lamb. Everything's parallel. So he's literally like to remember and to do a holiday. Jewish people to this day have holidays. They still celebrate the Passover, and that was in times of Moses. So it's always good to remember, and
because they've been consistent as making sure it's the historical implications.
Yeah, but it's like I don't negate any of that. A lot of people usually hear me say I don't celebrate holidays, but they're like, oh, then you don't believe in the resurrection or stuff like that. It's nothing to do with that. I'm not a Jehovah's Witnesses believer in that aspect. I still know resurrection happened. Or for Christmas, people can say like, oh, Jesus' birth, and I'll be like, what we were talking about earlier, what you guys were talking about. It's like, oh, he wasn't born on that day, but I'll still recognize his birth. That's something to be clear from the get-go.
Correct. But and what I was gonna add to that statement before was the transparent piece was I understand the reasoning because of the historical piece, and I agree with that. What I don't understand is the I don't know. For me, and it could just be me, but we worship Jesus all the time. We talk about the resurrection all the time. His birth, and we talk about that all the time. So it's the same for me all the time. It's as important every time. Even talking about it now is just as important as carving out that day, and that's just for me. So I observe all days. I'm like you, G. I kind of observe all days the same in that regard, but I don't necessarily hold one day to be more holy, to say no because it happened on these days. These are the days where I have to wear different clothes or wear my hair a certain way or have a certain feast at my house. No, let's do that in June. Let's do that in January. Let's do that day. You want to do that this Saturday? Let's do it this Saturday. Like I personally don't feel that we need to carve out specific things for it to be I almost feel as if it's fictitious.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes into what we were reading, because for you your faith allows you that as a Christian, but there's another brother or sister in the faith,
which is okay,
that completely wants to wear the suit on Sunday, or like I'm with G as well. Like even though I don't believe that the 25th of December is Jesus' physical birthday, I still celebrate, I celebrate God every single day, but I will use that day to be like, hey, I'm going to celebrate God. So my faith allows me that, but for another believer, maybe it doesn't. So it's always to the discretion, as long as there's no blatant sin and then you're like doing sacrifices in front of a tree or something because you're doing pagan practices. But that's the reality of life. There's some people that will do it. There's some people that won't.
Well, and our church, they'll say, invite people. When you talk about Easter, right? So the Easter Sunday, invite people because for some reason, people seem to be more open to coming to church or to hearing about Jesus or to have the discussion about the historical piece of that during this time period. So now that we have since it's available, take advantage of the opportunity to speak upon it, which I don't think is bad. Capitalizing on that, even on the Christmas or Thanksgiving, again, I'm good. Like I don't care. I'll eat eggs and white rice and eggs like for Thanksgiving. Like I don't really care too much about
Yeah.
all that. So
I think
honestly,
it becomes more of a tradition
correct.
rather than
Yep.
a holiday.
Right.
So I celebrate Christmas out of a tradition or the programming I have as a boy, and then the same thing for Easter. There's probably a lot of people that grew up little boy, little girl, their mom forced them to go every Easter, and so now as an adult, the compulsion is to do that
Correct.
out of tradition, not out of love.
Correct.
you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, and in that, the opportunity's still there though to share and to
Yep.
remind and talk and the time off, like in Christmas or Thanksgiving, the time is you have the time off.
No.
So now that people have time off, people are flying in from all over the world to be together with family. I don't think that's a bad thing.
It's beautiful. I like.
It's
I
not a
enjoy
bad
it.
thing to have those moments to be able to come together. I just don't. The overemphasis of it being like, yo, this is the absolute holy day.
I mean, in regards to that, it's something that Paul talked about in Galatians 8-11. He says, "Formerly, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those by nature that are not God's. But now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how can you turn back again to the weak and worthless elementary principles of the world, whose slaves you want to be once more? You observe days and months and seasons and years. I am afraid may have labored over you in vain." And he's talking about specific days
That's
or
perfect, man.
years.
what was the verse again? The
Galatians 8, 8-10, and it's Galatians 4, 8-10. And he's basically just talking about certain days that we put so much emphasis, or the Galatians at the time put so much emphasis for.
Like new moon festivals or whatever.
New moon,
yeah.
Sabbaths, and that's things like
Tradition.
the early elders even were talking about to Jesus. Why are you doing this on a Sunday or on the Sabbath? I mean,
Yeah.
and yet
I am the Sabbath, baby.
exactly. It's not about religion. It's about God, and yet we put so much focus on it. Now, sure, we can have some pagan influences try to come in, and that started when Council of Nicaea, I believe, is when they
Council of
started.
Nicaea,
yeah.
Council of Nicaea, yeah.
They started implementing actually the worship of Easter, but that was all in the conversion of back in the day, the Roman Catholic Church trying to merge the pagan religions so that the pagans can actually celebrate the Christian holidays, so that they can easily convert.
So it's kind of like combining all in one. So
The attempt was the
Christians
other
and
way.
then-
Right. The attempt was the other way. So it was meant to say, oh, this is your story. Well, this is our story. So you see how it kind of relates? So you can be Christian. It was meant to be that, but it ended up creating a new system.
Yep.
To where you have like
Now both of them, the
yeah.
bunnies and the
right,
the
or you have all
resurrection.
these different virgins.
So it
and you
makes
have all this
sense
stuff.
why all these the Easter, resurrection, Christmas, the supposed birthday of Jesus,
Yeah,
why they're kind of lining up.
yeah. So yeah, I mean in conclusion, that's where we're at. I mean, if you celebrate, make sure you're celebrating the historical resurrection of Jesus with your family. Make sure your kids understand that. As far as Easter is concerned, X that out of your life. Churches, if you're doing Easter egg hunts, be convicted by that. Making sure
Aren't some churches nowadays now switching it up to Resurrection Sunday.
they're
instead of
switching up
Easter?
to
Oh,
Resurrection
yeah, I think
Sunday.
most of them do.
Yeah, but still doing the Easter egg hunts outside and so forth. It's just a game. It's just for the kids. It's just a game. Whatever. And again, I'm gonna be the hypocrite where I'm saying this right now, but on Sunday my kid is gonna be hunting for some artificial eggs because I want to see her run around. I need her to take a nap at 2:00 when we get home.
and that's the reality. That's the real.
That's life.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But it'll be cute to see her run around. But yes, it is our responsibility as parents, as ministers of the gospel, to make sure that we're being truthful and saying, look, this isn't what we should be celebrating because of everything that G had read. This is the pagan holiday. This is what it means. This is the representation. This is what the symbols are. Be smart. Get studied up. Get understanding. And there might be some areas where you don't have full understanding. Continue to research. I'm going to do more research on what you read on the, what was it, the tablets and the
Babylonian.
yeah, I want to do more research on it so that I have better understanding. I'm pretty convinced from what I've already communicated, but I want to learn more and get more background because I think it's important because those things are going to start to
Cuneiform
come up
was
even
around,
more.
Cuneiform actually existed or was set in stone. Literally set in stone. That wasn't a pun,
Boom.
but 2000 BC is when actually everyone started using actual cuneiform. 3200 is when that story was written, Death of Nana. But during that time, I was reading during 2000s was around Abraham's time.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that.
Yeah, yeah. So then, we would have to see all that stuff, all that research. I want to get into that more, even at a later date. But yeah, get your congregation, studied up. Give them the real. Talk to them. Talk to your kids. Make sure they understand what's going on. And don't be led astray by all kind of philosophies and doctrines and parties and things that may seem convenient, because we have to give an account to God at the end. So we love you guys, and we are signing out. This is Mike the Baptist.
Geology.
J-Mo.
See y'all.